Hello and welcome to ELL Plus with me, Steve Choi.
And with me, Jasmin Dyer. In this week's programme we report on solidarity with Parisians in London,
A spider infestation in 2 primary schools,
Goldsmiths students supporting refugees,
and reforming the Freedom of Information Act.
This week, the attacks in Paris have dominated news headlines here in the UK. London's large French population of over 250,000 people was especially affected.
Our reporter Boglaka Lakosh went to a commemoration event to see how French people responded to the country's deadliest attack since the Second World War.
Terrorist attacks in central Paris last Friday night have left at least 129 people killed, another 99 critically wounded, and hundreds more injured in other parts of the French capital. The tragic events affected London as well. There are around 250,000 French people living here. Some of them immediately started to organize commemorations at Trafalgar Square on Saturday evening.
Organizers of the peaceful gathering claimed that local authorities would be present to ensure safety. Also, in order to avoid any fire incidents, attendants were asked to bring only flowers, streamers or flags instead of candles.
J'ai eu très peur, j'ai paniqué, j'ai tout de suite décidé d'appeler tout le monde et j'ai regardé les informations en boucle.
Tu sais pas comment tu te sens, genre t'as trop envie d'aimer tout le monde et en même temps tu détestes cette planète, tu vois, genre t'es là.
De fusillade à Paris, je me suis dit bon bah il y a une petite fusillade gentillette entre guillemets entre un couple ou n'importe quoi, enfin un petit truc pas du tout terroriste, j'ai pas du tout pensé à ça. Et ensuite j'ai vécu les trucs en direct sur mon portable, j'ai vu le nombre de morts qui augmentait, j'ai appelé mes proches.
J'ai paniqué, j'ai appelé tout le monde que je connaissais là-bas et enfin j'ai passé toute la nuit genre sur mon téléphone à être sûre que tout le monde allait bien et tout.
Amid the recovery from the shock, countries and individuals all over the world show their solidarity with Paris in several ways. And obviously, people have turned to social media to demonstrate their support for France. Keeping people updated by providing all the latest news has kept many journalists busy. But being a French correspondent based in London carries additional difficulties.
On reste très factuel dans la manière dont on raconte l'histoire, donc je pense que je reste objective. Après, c'est vrai qu'on peut se laisser envahir par l'émotion. C'est un tel. Moi, je suis parisienne, j'ai grandi à Paris, donc de voir ces attentats, ça m'a vraiment beaucoup bouleversée et touchée. Surtout que j'étais loin, donc on se sent assez impuissant. En tant que journaliste, j'ai aussi envie d'être à Paris pour pouvoir couvrir cela. Mais je voyais aussi un journaliste de la BBC devant la place de la République qui a fondu en larmes pendant un de ses directs parce que pris par l'émotion, mais je pense que ça montre aussi que voilà, c'est une telle horreur que journaliste ou pas, on est tous touchés par cela.
Days after the terror attacks, people, regardless of their faith, nationality or profession, are still trying their best to get over the dismay and live normal lives. Boglárka Lakos, ELL Plus, London.
2 East London primary schools were forced to close last Friday because of a false widow spider infestation.
Osmani Primary School and Thomas Buxton Primary School in Tower Hamlets sent their pupils home early to fumigate the premises. Here's a report from Katie Bales.
There has been an increased number of false widow spider sightings in the UK over the past 2 years, but as yet, no reports of schools in London closing until now. Osmani and Thomas Buxton Primary Schools in Whitechapel, East London, have been forced to send students home due to an infestation of this specific type of spider. Nests and eggs were found in the buildings and school grounds which were closed for fumigation. We contacted both schools, but they were unable to speak to us regarding the situation.
The Osmani Primary School reopened on Monday the 16th of November, but Thomas Buxton Primary School is only set to reopen on Monday 23rd of November. The false widow spider has often been referred to as one of the most venomous types in the UK. However, an infestation like this is incredibly rare and no fatalities have been recorded from a bite. So just how dangerous are these spiders?
The false widow spider arrived in England in the 1870s. They have distinctive cream markings and reddish-orangey legs. There are 650 species of spider in the UK, but only a dozen are capable of biting. They give painful but not fatal bites. Mick Massey, spider expert and photographer, told us, "This is utter nonsense. On this basis, every building in London would have to be fumigated."
But with temperatures in the UK getting increasingly warmer, it seems like these creepy crawlies are here to stay. But with the low risk associated with them, there is no cause for concern. Katie Bales, ELL Plus News, Whitechapel.
Now with more of today's news, here's our correspondent Jude Jweihan. Hi Jude.
Hi, thank you, Jasmin. Plans for Crossrail 2 to pass through Hackney have been placed on hold. Should permission be granted, construction would begin in 2020 with the aim of the line being in operation by 2030. Transport for London claim that at this stage there is an insufficient business case to support funding for this section of Crossrail. TfL has said, however, that if circumstances change, a branch line to Hackney could be an option in the future. Local authorities warn that more than 700 council houses in Hackney could be sold off before anyone has lived in them. Doubts over the forced sales policy were raised by Policy Exchange, who suggested that housing associations should be reimbursed for the discounts provided by councils. Councils would be forced to sell off social homes in high-value areas, such as Hackney, despite it being the 11th most deprived borough in England. A group of small businesses from East London are working with the Legacy Corporation to ensure that they are well equipped to win lucrative contracts. The Enterprise Alliance, which is supported by the Canary Wharf Group, is running training, workshops and networking events which aim to support small local firms getting involved in the Olympic Park redevelopment work.
November is Refugee Awareness Month. To mark the occasion, thousands of students have walked out of lectures to show their support.
Grace Lynn was at Goldsmiths College to see how the protest unfolded.
Today is not your usual afternoon at Goldsmiths College, London. Hundreds of students have walked out of class to protest against what they believe to be unfair government policies toward refugees, migrants, and international students.
The main purpose of the walkout has been to show how students and young people in general oppose the immigration policies of this government, how the immigration policy is a holistic approach against immigration. And it's affecting refugees, it's affecting international students, it's affecting just working migrants as well.
And I'm here to support the refugee crisis and the banning of the visas for international students, because I think that's incredibly unfair. And the international students are one of us. This is like our family. So there's no difference or contrast whatsoever. They're part of us.
My father came in the 60s, and when he came here there was a lot of racism towards him being here, and he wasn't accepted. And I just feel the connection is so, it's so deep. People don't understand each other's cultures and each other's religious beliefs, and because they don't understand it, they kind of disregard it.
International students say the government is making things harder and harder. Students must now prove financial support for the length of their course, pay an NHS fee when they arrive in the UK, and they cannot stay and work after their visas have expired.
What happened in Paris shows that we have to close our borders to precisely the 750,000 refugees who are fleeing from the bombers themselves. None of this makes sense to us, but it makes sense to those people who have no problems with taking advantage of what happened in Paris.
Today's walkout was a sign of solidarity from students at Goldsmiths and around the country. It was a protest to reject the government's policies regarding immigration and an opportunity to show their support for those affected. Goldsmiths students will be raising awareness for refugees over the course of this month. Grace Lynn, ELL Plus News, London.
Stay with us on ELL Plus News. After the break, we take a look at proposed changes to the Freedom of Information Act.
Stay with us. Welcome back to ELL Plus News.
Our top story today. After the Paris attacks, London's French population gathers in Trafalgar Square to show solidarity with Parisians.
Coming up, Lewisham Council calls for strict limits on betting machines. But first, this is the last week of the public consultation on the government's plans to reform the Freedom of Information Act. The proposals include charging for requests and making it easier to refuse them.
The Act allows the public to demand access to information held by public bodies by making a Freedom of Information request. It's become a valuable tool for journalists, some of whom are now concerned at the proposals.
Tom Bateman has this report.
The Freedom of Information Act was passed by Parliament 15 years ago. The aim was to make government more open. Information can be requested from any publicly funded body, but Freedom of Information requests aren't always taken seriously, and critics say the cost of meeting these requests is too high. The Local Government Association has criticised what it calls wacky FOI requests. They say that FOI requests cost local authorities nearly £32 million in 2010. The Independent Commission on Freedom of Information, based at the Ministry of Justice, is asking the public to give evidence. We invited the Commission to comment on the proposals being considered, but it declined. Although these proposals are not guaranteed to become law, some critics fear that freedom of information is living on borrowed time.
Here to talk to us is Terry Kirby, Director of the Journalism School at Goldsmiths, University of London. Terry, how would it affect journalists if they had to pay for filing Freedom of Information requests that could cost them up to £600?
Well, that might affect the individual freelancers working on their own, but in terms of the overall budget for newspapers, I think that is likely the kind of cost that newspapers absorb or media organisations will be able to absorb fairly easily. It might deter some of the more generalised or spurious requests that media departments actually make without really thinking about how to frame their questions and the specifics of the kind of information they really need.
How important are Freedom of Information requests for journalists?
Well, I think they were generally, the whole Freedom of Information Act was very warmly welcomed by the media when it was introduced. I think in practical terms there are limitations on the effectiveness of the legislation. This is because it's a very poor tool for daily use for journalists, because you can't put in a Freedom of Information request and get the information back within 24 hours or even less. Now, it is absolutely a pointless tool when it comes to daily journalism, because the information just simply doesn't arrive in time. Even in kind of slightly longer term journalism forms, it still isn't desperately helpful, because it can take weeks or months or even years for information to filter through the system. Whitehall and government bodies put up all kinds of obstacles to getting that information out in ways that some journalists want, and sometimes in ways that journalists can actually use effectively and recognise what information they've received, particularly when it comes to things like statistics.
But as you watched, there are, what they say, some wacky requests being made. For example, there was one in Richmond Council asking for the number of unclaimed bodies in their morgue. What do you say about that?
Well, I think that's actually a perfectly reasonable request. It's the kind of simple request that a local authority should be able to answer. It's not for journalists to explain what the information they ask for might be used for. That might be a legitimate story. It's the kind of inquiry that I might have made myself in the past, and indeed I've worked on stories when I was a national newspaper journalist in that kind of area about what happens to dead bodies in mortuaries. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable inquiry. There are, it has to be said, of course, strange, bizarre, spurious, unnecessary, random inquiries from both members of the public and journalists. Journalists should know better. Members of the public are entitled to ask what they want. Perhaps a charge might deter those kind of requests.
Thank you very much for your time, Terry.
My pleasure.
Lewisham Council is the latest to join the call for betting shops to set a maximum of £2 per bet.
It is all part of a government campaign to cut down the negative impacts of betting. The industry is against the move, as I've been finding out. Betting shops are commonplace in Lewisham. There are over 8 gambling shops on Lewisham High Street alone. The borough as a whole has 5 times the number of betting shops you'll find in other areas like Wimbledon.
And then it's promoting people to gamble and lose money, and then it's not just them that it affects their family and everything else.
And that's just a few of the reasons why Mayor Steve Bullock is backing a proposal that calls for a maximum £2 stake on electronic gambling machines. But will it stop the problems?
And hopefully that would limit the amount of people that would go into the betting shops. And eventually they can close down how many betting shops there is on Lewisham High Street.
1, 2.
While gamblers didn't want to
1,
give an
2,
interview,
3, 4.
most of them said they don't agree with the maximum betting limit. If the limit were to be introduced to Lewisham, they would go to other places to gamble. Most people on the street think the betting shops are doing more harm than good, but that hasn't stopped the demand. According to Lewisham Council, £14.5 million was spent on betting machines alone in 2014. The Association of British Bookmakers doesn't support the proposal. Their chief executive says, betting shops are the safest places to gamble. The risk is people will go elsewhere and choose to gamble in places that aren't safe and secure. Local people also don't think that limiting the betting stake would make a big difference.
What degree, you know, because that's just a fraction or a minimum to the solution, really, because the solution is actually out of control, really.
While betting is big business in Lewisham, the borough has joined 100 others around the country trying to bring in similar measures to cap bets at £2. Steve Choi, ELL Plus, Lewisham. With all the latest sports news, here's Hugh.
Thanks, Steve. And I think it's only right on this week that we start with the England-France game, the friendly that we saw on Tuesday night. A very poignant one after the attacks in France, and in fact the attacks involved the French team last Friday. They were playing at the Stade de France, they were playing Germany, and we heard the bangs go off and the bombs go off, and the fans running onto the pitch scared for their lives. So it's very poignant that the next football match they played was in Wembley, and we really marked the occasion very well. Both sets of fans came together. Prince William led out the two coaches with a blue, white and red bouquet of flowers. He led them out, and they had a lovely moment of silence. And when the French national anthem was sung, Wembley put the words up on the screen so the England fans could join in too, and this word solidarity it's being bounced around, but that was a very good moment between the two fans. England did run out 2-0 winners on the night, which is a good thing if you're English. Dele Alli got a great goal, and Rooney also settled the scores there. And Steve, you were there actually, weren't you?
Yes, I was there on Tuesday, and it was very emotional and historical moment. And personally, and as the third party, I wanted France to win, but you know, it's not important, and it was a good match.
Didn't matter.
And any other news for us?
Yeah, Crystal Palace fans would be interested to hear that a US investment group has reportedly put interest into and may buy shares in Crystal Palace Football Club. This is according to Steve Parry, the chairman of Crystal Palace. So Palace fans may expect to see maybe a few new players coming through the door.
That's good. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you.
The IARS International Institute held its annual awards ceremony this week.
The awards celebrate young people who make positive contributions to their communities. Maj Bouchot reports.
And now the winner, Suleiman Ahmad.
The IARS International Institute held this week at the Canada Water Cultural Space its Research and Youth Leadership Awards ceremony. For the fourth year running, The prizes went to inspirational young people for their contribution to their own communities.
Well, I think it's really nice for the young people to know that their work has been recognised. You know, over 100 young people were involved in the Camden Youth Action Showcase and in the videos. So for them, it's just a really nice honour to know that all their volunteering and their work in their community, you know, was appreciated, and they'll just be really happy.
Many private and public organizations were interested in joining forces with the IARS and showcasing the importance of volunteering. They will provide internships and work experience for the young winners.
My organisation, Community Action Southwark, supports volunteers and community groups in the borough of Southwark, and to be given the opportunity to recognise and support young community leaders was too good of a chance to turn up. So we felt it was really important to support such a great initiative as this.
Many projects were shortlisted for the 6 categories, among them the Peacemaker of the Year, the Community Leader and the Youth Digital Award.
We had 6 categories for this year's awards, and the criteria were carefully selected in order to identify projects that they are of high quality, but most importantly, projects that they were truly youth-led, and young people were involved at all stages of the process, from designing the project and running the project as well.
Whatever their ages, young people are keen on playing a major role in their own communities and inspire more generations. Having a chance is the only thing they need to prove themselves. And by organizing this competition, IRS International Institute provided a ground for them. Thanks to its partners and sponsors, the winners will acquire more skills in order to benefit in the better way their own communities. Mars Busto, ELL Plus, Canada Water.
And thank you for coming.
And now here's the weather with Grace Lynn.
Hello. Temperatures in some parts of Lewisham fell to 12 degrees Celsius last night due to blustery winds. And there has been the occasional shower here and there through the morning, with winds of 13 miles per hour and temperatures falling to 11 degrees Celsius. This afternoon, as we go through, it will be drier and brighter with temperatures remaining around 11 degrees. And this morning and this evening will be slightly cooler with more raining developing over South London. Overnight, temperatures will drop to 9 Celsius with the possibility of showers. So on the whole, Friday will be noticeably cooler than Thursday with showers throughout the day. The Met Office predicts sleet and snow showers for Southeast London, so be careful out there.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you very much, Grace. That's all we have time for now. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time on ELL Plus. Good afternoon.